Yes, it is 9 o'clock. So at this time, I will go ahead and call this meeting of the New Hanover County Board of Education Policy Committee to order. Ms. Crable.
Aye. Or no,
And-
do I make a motion or?
And I am here. A quorum is present. So I will go ahead and ask for an approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
And I will second. Ms. Crable, how do you vote?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. So we will move on to approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I approve the minutes motion to approve the minutes as presented.
And I will second. Ms. Crable, how do you vote?
Aye.
I will vote aye as well. Now moving on to the third item on our agenda, what we have been waiting all month for, our policy updates. So how do you want to start with them, Ms. Crable?
I guess let's just go in the order, like numerical order. That's how I have them on my desk.
Okay, that's fine. So what's
Like 3620.
Yep, is the screen frozen?
Yes.
Okay, we'll just wait for that.
See dots.
Yeah, we'll just wait for that to pull up so people can follow along with us at home.
Did we make sure Anita knows that we're live?
Yes, ma'am, you are live.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. We're working on the issue now with the frozen screen.
It's unfrozen, at least on my end.
I think we're good now, aren't we?
Yeah.
Okay, so the first policy on our agenda today is policy 3620. Extracurricular activities and student organizations. I know Mr. Lewis had a few things here, so I will let him begin. Mr. Lewis, are you on the call, sir? No? Okay, I think he just might have made his updates. Mr. O'Brien, Ms. Barnum, do you want to take us through this?
I think we're particularly talking about section B.
That's correct.
Okay,
Good
stand by.
morning.
Good morning, Ms. Farr. How are
I'll
you
let
doing
Mr.
today?
O'Brien step in on these.
It's
I'm
the
still
fifth,
here. I'm
it's
still
the
here.
fifth paragraph we're talking about, Al.
Yes, ma'am. And I think that where we landed, we had an opportunity to talk with other districts to see how they were approaching this. And I think that we landed with middle school athletes that we would allow them to participate on a team consistent with their gender identity. Certainly different districts are handling this different. Certainly that's also different when you get to the high school level. There is a more detailed process in place that is provided by the North Carolina High School Athletic Association. But for middle school, this was our recommendation.
Mr. O'Brien, I know I've talked with Mr. Lewis about this a bunch, and because it kind of rolls into, Title IX, our committee work. Do we not think, or do the other school systems not think that by allowing middle school kids to do this one way and then having them have to switch courses in high school another way, has that been problematic for anybody?
Well, truthfully, most of the districts that we talked to have yet to have to work through this scenario.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking. That this is going to be very rare. I think, because it's middle school is a tough time as it is. Well, I'm okay with the wording if that's what is legal and it's what other people are doing.
I do believe, and I don't, I do, in conversations with Mr. Lewis, he felt like that this was also supported by where the law is federally.
Yes.
But I would have to defer to the legal folks on the call, but he did feel like that this recommendation most closely aligned with what the federal recommendations would be as well.
So this is Deborah. I had a couple of conversations with Mr. Lewis about this and looked back over the research. I mean, in the context of middle school, there isn't any state board policy. I mean, you could adopt the policy, but there really isn't any guideline for middle schools. And I think the board has the authority to go in a number of ways to prohibit it, to allow it, to follow a policy like the high school one or a slightly different one. And this is, I agree, I think that this is where the law is heading on the federal level. And other than some, specific cases where there's been some controversy about unfair advantage, for example, transgender girls playing on girls sports teams, there has been a little bit of OCR activity in that area, but I think that the law supports this. We can't say anything in this area for 100% certain, but I think this is certainly supportable. And
So Mr. Lewis, I'm sorry, Mr. Lewis has stepped into my office, so he can speak as well. I didn't mean to cut you off, Deborah.
no, I was just saying, I definitely think this is consistent with where the law is headed in this area.
Yes, I would piggyback on that point, Deborah, that I've definitely gotten questions from the community about this. They definitely want to know where our stance is. I definitely think the area of the law is going towards inclusion and protection for LGBTQ students, particularly transgender athletes. I think just yesterday, President Biden announced a executive order that directed the Department of Education to review all their policies and procedures specific to sexual orientation and LGBTQ students for more inclusive policies. So I think he is tipping his hand in the direction of inclusion, including sports and athletics. So it's a bit of a gray area right now, but I think in the very near future, there will be more federal guidance in this area. So because we're already getting questions, I think it's best practice to not necessarily hide what we're doing or anything like that. I'm not trying to hide it, trying to be just transparent as possible with including the law for middle school students in particular. It's the simplest action plan going forward, speaking with Al and other athletic directors across the state. I think it would be appropriate for us to move forward with this policy update, particularly middle school students and transgender identity.
All right.
This is not part of policy, but I think it would behoove us to, if we do come across this situation in middle school, to explain to those students and their families that once you get out of middle school, the process is different, just so nobody is caught off guard. I mean, that's not part of our policy, but I think we should be thinking forward in that direction.
Yep, I agree. And speaking with Al, I think Al agrees as well that we do need to explain on a case-by-case basis when there's actual request or this is actually put into practice, that the process is different. In high school, we don't actually make that determination, or we're not even making the determination at the middle school level either. But the process for applying is a lot more in-depth and completely different in high school. And we can't guarantee participation because it's outside of our hands. So I agree as a conversation piece with the family and the student when those situations pop up in the future.
I concur.
All right. I didn't really have anything on this except I know Mr. Wildeboer was curious as to the requirement that a student be in attendance? Is that for a half a day or what is attendance? If a student comes in late or leaves early, will they still be eligible to participate in an athletic event on that day?
This actually crosses over, I think, into a different policy a little bit later on. But yes, students are considered present if they attend half the day. But I think in one of the 4,000 policies that we'll see later today, there is language around the students needing to be in attendance to be able to participate on game day. The High School Athletic Association recommends, but the wording in our policy is must. So I don't know if that is covered in here, but I know it's covered in a little bit in a different policy.
It's
Okay.
probably in the school attendance policy. I remember reading that. So do you think that we should reference that policy, for more information, blah, 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 kind of thing?
It's
I
in
do.
this policy. This policy says to participate in an interscholastic athletic contest, a student athlete must be in attendance on the day of the contest if school is in session, unless the principal excuses the student beforehand for educational purposes.
And is that the attendance policy 4400?
No, that's this one, 3620. It's a couple paragraphs up from where we just.
Oh, all right, in that first paragraph, okay.
I'm fine with that. Does anybody have anything else on this policy?
Yeah,
I would probably recommend some tweaking of that language if that's possible.
What do you have in mind, sir?
I would probably recommend that we take out the beforehand language, and then I think that we can also probably just leave it up to the principal's discretion, and whether or not it's a scholastic activity or not, I think is probably not necessary, because I can think of several different scenarios where a kid might need to be out but still be allowed to play that may not be regarding a scholastic endeavor.
Could you give one of those examples? Because that's where we're going to get in trouble when principals get discretion, which might appear arbitrary.
Sure, I've got to go to a funeral. I've got to take a sick parent to a doctor's appointment. None of that is scholastic, but I don't think we would want to prohibit a kid from participating because they have an extenuating circumstance. That would just be my opinion.
No, and I agree with those
I
kinds of.
disagree with that. Because when do we count students absent? We have to follow if we're counting them absent for those things, they're absent on those days. What I don't want us to get into is making exceptions for just because, and if we're not doing it for the academic side, we're doing it for the sports side, and it's like, oh, we just need them there for sports. So I think we have to be consistent around the board. And those are hard calls that we have to make, but that's what we're here to do. It's not about being on anyone's side. It's like, what is the policy state so that it's not compromising? And I don't want us to get into, well, his was a funeral. This one had a bloody nose. If they're absent, they're absent. I think we should just rest there.
Well, I can go with that. I mean, I see both parts, but that's why I asked my question, is because if principals, I want them to have the latitude that they need, to manage their school. But these are the kind of things where we get ourselves in trouble because parents will talk, kids will talk. Well, I just saw, Stephanie, at the pharmacy, or I saw Stephanie somewhere and she gets to play. And does this, I'm assuming that this covers middle school as well, not just, it says interscholastic athletic contest. So I'm assuming that means middle school and high school, correct?
Yes, I would assume so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. I don't want to turn our principals into amateur sleuths trying to figure out if X, Y, or Z is actually happening, or if somebody lied to somebody. So I'm fine with having the more stringent language, I suppose. Does anybody else have anything on policy 3620?
Well, what did we decide on that? So let's just
I
make,
think we're gonna, it sounds like we're gonna keep the language as is.
okay, so, but the language as is says unless the principal excuses the student beforehand. So are we striking that?
Unless the principal excuse.
It's in that paragraph where because I think we need to add must be present at least a half a day, to make that clear. And then, unless the principal excuses the student beforehand for educational purposes. Like educational stays in, right?
Yeah, I would think
On a field trip or,
that it would seem like it. Yeah, it would seem like it.
I would suggest that the language be consistent with being marked present, because that would cover the time period for marking present.
so,
Yeah, I would, yeah.
so we
I
get,
was going to just suggest that you not add the half day, just, it should be referenced or consistent with your attendance policy.
Okay.
So
Okay.
if it's based on attendance, then does the principal need to approve anything? So does it just need to be, if you're absent, you don't get to participate no matter what the reason is?
that's
Yes.
what I'm hearing us say.
Yes.
And so then shouldn't we then reference attendance policy 4000, just so that everybody is clear on what attendance means?
We can. I don't think we have to. I mean, we certainly can. That's, I don't, reference, you can reference it. That's,
I would just hate to have that policy say something different than what we're saying here.
It could be added as a cross-reference,
Yeah.
which is what we've done at the bottom, so the language of the policy itself isn't too bulky.
Well, yeah,
right.
because it is already referenced in the cross references. It just wasn't in there, somewhere else. And it does talk about it in the paragraph A, the third paragraph. All right, so I have a couple questions about A. I think we talked about these last time because they were in my notes, but I don't recall what we did. So if you could just take 1 minute and just talk me through. In section A, where we're talking about before participating in extracurricular activity. No, this is the first paragraph, where it says a student must be properly enrolled as a full-time student. Do we need to make a reference that the ROTC has an exception as noted in policy 4120 to that?
I would, yeah, I would say no. Again, I think we gotta be careful not to overload these.
Okay. Sometimes these exceptions are the ones that get us. That's why I'm just trying to be thorough there. And then, do we need any language in there, Mr. O'Brien, about, C-Tech students are allowed to play sports at their home school? Because that's another, and we talked about homeschool students last time too, about that they are allowed to play on our sports teams.
That's a
And participate.
practice instead of a policy, wouldn't it
Pardon me,
be?
I'm sorry.
Would that be considered a practice instead of the policy? Because we would know that their home school would be, let's say, Hoggard, but they're at C-Tech, so they would have their home school. That would be our practice.
So our current practice is for our early colleges is that they are either assigned a school that they can participate at, or Dr. Faust, like you said, or they can participate at their home school. The reason we give an assigned school option, for example, Ashley is on the south end, so C-Tech is on the north end, so it may not be practical for them to get all the way back down to Ashley High School to be able to participate there. So they have been allowed to participate at Laney because that is their closest school. So each of our early colleges or non-traditional schools is assigned to a school or their district school.
So here's an example that I heard from a family that they recently got redistricted, from Laney to New Hanover. but they were considered that their neighborhood, but were considering going to CTEC and wondered which school if they got a choice of who they got to play for, because one was closer, but one was their home school. How would we address something like that?
I believe that would be covered in our own, well, by the association, it would defer to our local policy on that.
Right. So our local policy seems to be silent on that. So that's why I'm just wondering if we need to put that in a policy statement somewhere. Maybe we cover it in our student attendance, not attendance, with the policy we're coming up to, student assignment policy. I mean, this is such an area where people tend to fudge, and I'm going to say cheat straight up on where they go, where they say they live and where they go to school and all that kind of stuff. And people tend to do it more for sports than they do for academics.
Yes, I deal with that quite a bit in student assignment. So, I mean, other than following our student assignment plan, anytime we know of situations that don't meet hardship or any other kind of transfer requirements, then we deny those. So sports would not be an opportunity for that, other than the policy waiver this year that we had regarding not being able to field a team.
Right. So we don't need to cover ourselves by putting this in a policy statement, or just referencing that, it will be handled by,
No, I wouldn't. I don't think. But
Deborah,
No.
or I'm looking at like Deborah or McKenna to sort of weigh in on that. Not all school systems have the same choices that we have.
I mean, I certainly think that you would want to have some kind of a regulation or procedure, something that was standardized so that, people know when they ask the question. But I don't know that you have to put every potentiality and address every potentiality in a policy if you've got the general guidelines. So, I mean, it certainly could go in there, but it could also go into a regulation or procedure.
Okay, I'm good with that.
I do agree that we probably need to have it, written somewhere. I agree with Ms. Crable on that, whether it's in policy or whether it's just in a practice, because certainly, at this point, it's widely known by our athletic directors. It's been shared with them in our meetings, but for, if somebody wanted to see it written, I think it would be hard to find. So I agree that we probably need to have it somewhere so that it is delineated for families that have questions.
And so that along those same lines, kids who are actually homeschooled, not part of New Hanover County schools, they are allowed to participate on our sports teams and in our extracurriculars. Is that correct?
We have allowed that, but I think we also had talked about formulating some policy around that. And I know
right. That's what I have in my notes, is that we're going to.
Yeah, if I could weigh in on that, again, unless there's a policy about admission of those students on a part-time basis, they really should not be participating in the extracurriculars and athletics. And so I had done some digging, and I think maybe McKenna had sent some information, and we passed that along. But I haven't seen any proposal for a policy on that yet. And I can follow up with Al to see where he is, although I'm sure that's gotten buried at the bottom of his many things that are going on with COVID right now. So, but that's something that I think needs to be in place first before, students are allowed, homeschool students are allowed to participate.
And McKenna did send several good examples over, so I do have those. So, Ms. Stagner, I'll reach out so that we can formalize something there.
Okay, thank you guys for addressing that. I knew I had it in my notes, but I couldn't remember if it was just me thinking it or if we'd actually talked about it. Okay, well, I'm good.
Okay. So, Dr. Faust, did you have anything?
He left.
Oh, okay.
Did we finalize where we started with the we're just going to leave that as is and not make any changes? Is that where we landed?
What do you mean?
Or to participate in interscholastic contest, student athlete must be in attendance the day of the contest?
I think we formalized it to say that,
Yeah.
yeah, you have to be.
That's fine.
So there were no
Okay.
changes to that?
Oh,
Wait,
I had in
thought
my
you
notes, yeah, I had in my notes that it was going to be a period after session and delete the rest of that with no exceptions.
Yes, that's right. Sorry. Yes.
So we're just leaving, taking out the first paragraph and leaving in just the second paragraph?
We're going to put, to participate in an interscholastic athletic contest, a student athlete must be in attendance on the day of the contest, the school is in session, period.
Period.
Yep. And we're going to remove unless the principal excuses, et cetera, et cetera.
But you know what? In our attendance policy, it says that a student is excused if they're on a college visit or they're on a school field trip or,
But they're still marked present, is what I understood. They're still marked as being present. They're just excused, so.
okay.
I think that on a field trip, they would be counted present, but I think if you were taking a college day, I think you're coded excused, but I think you're absent.
Right.
That's correct.
So if on Friday night, your team is playing at Greenville Rose and you decide you want to take a day to visit East Carolina University as a college day, you are ineligible to participate that night based on this.
That's correct. That's what I'm hearing. Yeah.
Exactly.
And is that what our intent is?
It sounds like that was what the superintendent wanted. What do you think? I mean, I'm fine if somebody wants to take a college day, but then you get into every
What other,
eventuality, which again, I don't want to.
Al, is that common as a principal? Is that kind of stuff like commonplace?
I mean, I think it's, I wouldn't say it happens on a regular basis, but I think it's very possible that that would be a thought process that a parent might have.
Yeah. Well, maybe they won't schedule it that way if they know they can't play.
Yeah, I would leave. Again, I don't want to
Yeah.
try to legislate everything through, you know, because you can what if it to death. So.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so policy 3620 on for first reading at the April board meeting. Our next policy is homeless students, policy 4125. And I had nothing here, so I will turn it over to Ms. Farnham if you had something.
Yes. So, and thank you, McKenna, for sending an updated version. I do have a response. We did a little bit of research on appeals section that we had in, I have a page number, but I realize they all print differently. So let me go back and find the section. B, C, D. In section D,
That roughly like page 5 or 4 or 5.
7, roughly page 7 for me, although mine does say it's on page 7 of 2. So I don't think that's right. But where it talks about appeal to the board of the superintendent's decision.
Yep.
So in discussing with my team and my homeless liaison here, that section of appealing to the board is not a requirement under McKinney-Vento, which is the homeless legislation or regulations, but that it would go straight to the liaison at the state or the coordinator, the state coordinator. So our recommendation is to remove that section unless it's the desire of the board to keep that in. So
No,
McKenna,
let's remove it.
yeah, what thoughts do you have on that?
I'm good with that, to keep it as clean as possible, less number of steps.
I think we should remove it unless McKenna or Deborah has something, or some objection to that.
I have not researched that, so I'm going to defer to McKenna about her familiarity with that process.
The
And
state
Julie.
So the state process in McKinney-Vento doesn't require it going to the board. The reason we did that was just in general, people have the right to appeal to the board any final administrative decision of the school. In this case, it would be the superintendent would make the final administrative decision. So it was just providing them under 115C 45C their right to appeal to the board.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm fine removing it. Ms. Crable?
I'll go either way. It doesn't really matter. I mean, there's so many rules that are in here that it just seems like whatever is the easiest to really manage and do. 'Cause if we have too many steps, then we tend to skip a step by
Yeah,
inadvertently, not because we're scooting the law. You just sometimes don't do it.
I would go ahead and remove it.
Well, the issue is though, what if the issue is what school they're going to attend? The board needs to be making the decision for a school assignment.
Oh,
What do you mean, making the decision or hearing the appeal?
Well,
Because that's generally not the board's decision unless it's an appeal.
well, the board makes school assignment. I mean, technically it's the board who's making the school assignments. I mean, I know it's practically.
present it to us and we say yeah, or we say no.
We don't have anything to do with, in practice, we don't have anything to do with school assignments unless they appeal to the board. We hear-
Yeah,
Like the
so-
different plans.
Yes, we do. We just did it.
So the way that the statute does put the authority for making school assignments with the Board of Education, and the Board of Education does that by setting up a school assignment plan that the administration implements. And then if there is an appeal to any decision made under that plan, it goes to the board for a final board decision. So the ultimate decision is always made by the board, either because they've decided and set the assignment plan, and that's a general decision for all students, and in specific instances where there's an appeal. So if the appeal is to the school assignment, then that is something that the board would need to hear.
So can we articulate in here that the appeal to the board is there would be an appeal to the board on the determination of school assignment? Because I mean, this is speaking a lot about attendance zone of the student, but all of the McKinney-Vento requirement isn't that. So I don't think it really, because some of it's about transportation, some of it's, can we articulate, if that section needs to stay in, I'm comfortable with that, because I think that does make sense with regard to school assignment. So what if it says appeal to the board of the superintendent's decision if the complainant is dissatisfied with the superintendent's decision on school assignment or regarding school assignment? Would that work?
I think so.
Because that's the provision of appeal, right?
Right. Yeah, I
And
think
then-
that,
Julie, are other decisions of the superintendent appealable then to the state coordinator about transportation or other issues? I haven't studied McKinney-Vento, so I'm not.
Yes, yes. It is within the regulatory directions from DPI and consistent with McKinney-Vento regs that all of that goes to the state coordinator for resolution. They sort of operate it in a sort of similar to the administrative remedies under IDEA with dispute resolution within DPI. They kind of operate it the same.
Yeah. So I think we would want to work on that language a little bit. Under that section, under subsection 5, it says if the matter under appeal is a school assignment. So it already talks about that as a sort of a distinct area. We might want to say something about in all cases other than school assignment, the complainant may appeal to the board or something like that. I might suggest that we work on that language and then circulate it to Ms. Crable and Mr. Beaulieu so that it can be presented for first reading. I hate to sort of tweak it on the fly and then have missed something. But if there's consensus on the board or on the committee to address that issue by limiting the appeal to the board, then we can do that and just circulate the language instead of trying to draft it right now.
That's wise.
I'm okay with that, and we need to make sure we send it to Pete too.
Right. I'm sorry. And but
Okay.
I can work with Julie and McKenna on getting that in order.
And also the other option is leaving it like it is and not taking out that, not trying to dissect the appeal to the board part, right?
Sure. But if there's a desire to make it more streamlined and limit those additional appeals, I don't know, Julie, how many do you get of those?
None.
I
The possibilities there. But I will have to use this opportunity to shout out to my team. Our folks really know how to collaborate and find common ground with families, and we just don't have a ton of appeals within special education or within McKinney-Vento.
then you can certainly leave it and it's there if someone needs it.
In the words of James Carville, keep it simple, student. Yeah, that's fine with me. Either way, we can leave it. We can, y'all can decide, Ms. Farm, whatever y'all need. If you want to change it, we'll change it.
Well, and if this helps, the amount of time we've discussed the policy is more time than I've spent on even trying to negotiate McKinney-Vento decisions because we don't have appeals.
That's amazing. We haven't had any. That's amazing.
Right. So I'm fine leaving it in if you guys are comfortable with it.
Ms. Crable?
I'm comfortable with it.
Okay, that's great. We'll keep it as is then. So is there anything else from anybody on 4125?
The only ththing is the language in here about we do have the language changed in B section 2 on assignment that's the superintendent designates the assistant superintendent of student support, but then throughout the policy it still mentions the superintendent. Is it kind of understood? I know I've asked this question a ton of times and I'm evidently slow on picking it up.
I ask the same question, Julie, every time.
If it says, for example, on into that section, like on page 6, the local liaison shall inform the superintendent. Is that okay to leave it like that, just knowing that would be the assistant superintendent? I just want to make sure we're still compliant with policy if we're using the designee.
McKenna, can you speak to that?
I think, yeah, if we can change it. I can change all the superintendent references to superintendent or designee if you'd be more comfortable with that, but the superintendent delegates responsibilities a lot, so.
Okay. I'm fine with it.
I can add or designate. It's not a problem.
Well, on page 2 of the policy, it already says the superintendent shall designate.
Right.
The assistant superintendent of student support. So I didn't know if from then on in the policy, it needs to say assistant superintendent, or if it should just still say superintendent or designate. And I guess that's really just a cleanup kind of thing. And it might be unnecessary.
I would guess that it would be, because even if we say it the same way we say the board, if we say the superintendent shall, and the superintendent fulfills that obligation by designating somebody to do it, I feel like that's still keeping within the policy,
I'm good.
I think.
It's still coming to you, Julie. Doesn't matter what you're called.
I was just about to say, I'm still not confused about what I'm supposed to do with it. I know what I'm supposed to do.
Right.
Just want to make sure the language works for everybody else.
Is that an accurate interpretation? If it's our superintendent and he chooses to fulfill that obligation by just saying you do it, is that good, Ms. Dagger?
Generally, it is. I mean, there are some decisions that under law, the superintendent himself or herself may have to make. But I think that in general, for policy purposes, when it says the superintendent shall, the superintendent can accomplish that by delegating the authority. There may be, again, some cases where that can't be delegated, but I don't think you need to worry about it in policy language.
Okay. All
And
right.
I'm looking
good.
at it, and it does say or designee in a bunch of places. I mean, as I'm reading it, I think it is pretty clear that it could be the designee who's actually doing the work.
Okay.
So maybe if we just make sure that's consistent in every one of them, so that it doesn't look like or designee in part, and then some of them belong only to the superintendent just because they're not aligned.
Absolutely.
Will that work,
Okay,
McKenna?
I'll add. Sure, absolutely.
All right. Are we good on 4125? All right, we can move 4125 on to the agenda for first reading in our April meeting. And that brings us to 4130. I saw quite a bit of red on the discretionary admission. So I will turn it over to Ms. Varnum to get us started.
I'm gonna tell you, I had a lot of questions on how we picked what school they went to, because a lot of them were not the closest. And it seemed like it would be almost a hardship to get the kids, a hardship of employment to get employees' kids to a school that wasn't even close to where they worked.
Yeah, I have some notes on this one. This is what it has been. And I think there are some that really need to be discussed. This one might take some time.
Can we look at this more closely? I had a bunch of comments on it.
So, yeah, we certainly, Ms. Varnum, if you had some, and Ms. Crable, if you had some that we might want to change, we could just do this next month. You could make those changes, and then we can move forward, or we can do it now. I mean, how much time do you think this policy would take? I guess what I'm saying, if we think this is going to take like an hour to get all of them lined up correctly, we could just do that outside of the committee and bring it back next month.
I don't think it will take that long, but I don't know how many questions Ms. Craybill has. So I have some suggestions for some changes. So you guys can decide if you would like for me to make some choices for you from place of employment and give you some options. And that's one question I have too. Could there be options in the elementary school? Because we have schools with different calendars. So for example, if you look at the school for New Hanover High School, or if I'm employed at New Hanover High School, then my elementary school is Freeman. So Snipes is closer, pretty much on the same back street, different calendar, but could that be an option? But then also if we look at Williston is connected to Gregory, but Forest Hills is its elementary school. if I'm working at Williston, my kid goes to Forest Hills as employee benefit.
And if you look at Gregory, if I work at Gregory, then my kid goes to Forest Hills. And I was thinking maybe that's because of Spanish immersion, but not everybody's in the Spanish immersion. So yeah, some of these just didn't seem intuitively correct.
Right. So it is because of Spanish immersion, but there could be, there could be the opportunity if you're at Williston, if you want your kindergartner to go into Spanish immersion, then it could be your employee benefit site if it's a kindergartner and you're going into Spanish immersion. I feel like there should be choices, but then the eligibility for the program should still stand. So we wouldn't say, well, if you work at Williston, you've got the choice of Gregory, but I have a third grader that's never been in Spanish immersion, so they can't go to Gregory. It won't work. So still meet the enrollment criteria, but give those options. But then also for calendar, so for Mosley, for example, which is on here as Mary Mosley, the elementary school for them is Snipes. They're on a completely different calendar. So I think there should be an option such as Freeman, which is on the same street.
Right, like across the street, right. Those are some of the ones you're pulling up are the exact same thing. Like, and even at JC Rowe, you've got Alderman down there, and Alderman is pretty far away. Why wouldn't we pick like Mary C. Williams or Sunset Park, which is on the same road?
Yeah.
So my question about that, this whole policy is whether that much level of detail in the chart needs to go into policy, or whether, again, you set the general parameters that employees will have the benefit to, enroll their students, they'll be admitted, but that, this may change from year to year based on the capacity of the school, the number of spaces that are available as well. I don't know, but I wonder whether there would maybe be some benefit to putting this into a regulation that goes along with the policy, and direct the superintendent to, to create the list every year and make, just present it to the board for information.
Ms. Dagger, that was actually going to be my question, is why do we have this? Why do we have this chart? Can't we just write in our policy something to the effect of employees of New Hanover County Schools will be granted discretionary admission for their children at a school, designated by, or they could have choice, but something just simple, just a quick sentence about this benefit.
Yeah. And the way that I've seen it work and I haven't polled districts across the state, but I know in some cases then, when the student assignment is brought to the board for approval to admit as, a non-resident student, it just has the school there and the board, approves it at that time, but hasn't set out in detail the chart and how that sausage gets made. It's just presented when the board approves the request. So Julie, would that work? Would that make it easier?
Yeah, I would want to still keep the chart, but then have a couple of options in them, if that's okay, and add that to the student assignment plan, which historically has been how we have, really listed out hardship guidelines, listed out, all of the criteria for enrollment, because it can't all fit in the policy. So I'm good on that. Now, Deborah, I think I have a question about what you just shared, and I'll wait till after a policy meeting to discuss it, if that's easier, because I haven't been bringing non-domiciled enrollments to the board to determine. So if I need to do that, I need to do that differently.
Yeah, we can talk about that. So would the language be we would maybe take out the paragraph that says the following chart describes and take out the chart, but is there a need to address the language? Please. Yeah, is a benefit of employment, full-time school system employees may enroll their non-domiciled students in the school in which they work, or other available school determined in the school assignment plan or something like that.
Yeah, I would say the school assignment plan describes which schools are considered closest to an employee's place of employment for purposes of this policy. So instead of saying the following chart, can we say the school assignment plan or the student assignment plan? Sorry.
I think it'd be perfect.
Okay.
That's where our regulations are.
Okay, and I had a question, kind of, I thought Deborah was working her way to it, but she really wasn't. In that, in paragraph A1, where we're talking, you know, it's all in red. If you look down 1, 2, 3, the fourth line, where it says the school nearest to where they work. And then if you come down to the 2 more paragraphs where we're talking about the following chart describes, and then it says the place of employment for system-wide employees is the school in which they spend the majority of their time. So like in the example, in the first paragraph, it talks about the bus driver, wherever he drives the most, or I'm using he generically, wherever the bus driver drives the most. And then, but then it talks about like other school system employees, the school where they spend their most time. So I'm thinking of, let's say, we'll just use Julie as an example. Julie has kids. And so what school does she spend the most of her time in? Or do we use that clause, or do we use the clause of the school nearest to where they work? You know, so it seems like it's kind of contradicting that benefit.
So it works out well, actually. So in the one above where it's talking about bus drivers, it's the school for which they drive.
Right, that makes sense.
Yeah, down below where the place of employment for system-wide employees. So for me, I do spend the majority of my time, sadly, in the office. And so for me, it would be schools in the Veterans Park area. So Anderson, Murray, Ashley. But for example, somebody that works at the Carolina Beach complex, Carolina Beach Road complex, CBRC, it might be for the high school. I mean, might be Hoggard. Let me look at that just to make sure.
Yeah, Hoggard's probably the closest, but
yeah. So, but if it's somebody that works all over the place, we can always consider those. Those employee benefit requests come into the school, and if it's not somebody that works within that school, then we help make those decisions. I don't run into many problems with those.
So I'm a teacher, or I'm a school system employee, and I want my kid to, let's say, go to, you know, Parsley. And so do I come to you to ask for that? Or do I go to Parsley and try and enroll my kid? Like, is that kind of thing outlined? I didn't read that in this policy about how to do that, or is that a regulation?
Yeah, that's regulation. So if you're a teacher at Parsley, you talk to your principal about that, and you get the employee benefit paperwork so that you can try to enroll your child there. And then as long as you're an employee there, principals can sign off on that. Gotcha. If you are an employee at Myrtle Grove Middle School, and you want your child there, but let's say you are only part-time at Myrtle Grove and you also work somewhere else, that would probably end up coming to my office.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're going to take out that last sentence that the following chart describes. We're going to take that out and just say that they'll be assigned consistent with the regulations in the student assignment plan.
I think that Julie recommended to, instead of saying the following chart describes, would be the student assignment plan describes which schools.
Okay.
Yep.
And then take out the chart.
Okay. I'm good with that.
And so how would an employee access that chart then? How would they, would that be in some handbook that employees get?
It's in the it will be in the student assignment plan that is accessible on our webpage. That's with our enrollment documents. So yes, it's available, just like the student assignment plan is now.
Okay.
Yep.
All right, so I had another question in A1, in the second paragraph, where it says employees exercising this benefit may be required to provide student transportation to and from the school. So how do we decide the may versus the should versus the not? Because that's a big issue with school choice, about how does a kid get to school? And I've seen it's going to come up again in another policy, but I can't remember where I wrote it, but I do have a note. But so, because it was my understanding, if you are out of district, then you have to supply your own transportation no matter what, unless you're like McKinney-Vento or you have other, other hardships.
Right. And I don't know if Eddie might want to speak to this, Mr. Anderson, but if, for example, you are a teacher at, let's say, Murrayville Elementary, and you have, you don't live in that attendance zone, but you are asking for employee benefit for your child to go to Trask Middle School. But you're still in school. Their day doesn't end just quite like yours, and then you ask for your child to be transported from Trask to Murrayville. The only way that can happen is if there is already a route and there's room on that route. So it's not to say you can't have any transportation. So I think under employee benefit, there can be opportunities to jump on a bus route that already exists if there's space. But I want Mr. Anderson to speak to that because I'm sharing things that he tells me.
Yeah,
I only know it because he tells me.
well, transportation is not provided for employee benefit. Now you can request transportation, and Ms. Varnum's right. If there is a route and a stop and space on the bus, then we'll accommodate that request. But by rule, transportation is not provided for employee benefit.
So should we just say that?
No, I wouldn't. I think,
I mean,
I think it's good.
it's stated on the form when they request it.
Okay.
When on the form they have to fill out to request an employee benefit, it's stated there that there's they acknowledge that there's no transportation.
Yeah, so it says transportation will not be provided, and it requires that the employee, just like when parents ask for open choice or a transfer, they understand transportation is their responsibility. But then if there are opportunities to assist with transportation of an employee, like Mr. Anderson said, so I think it still should be clear that transportation is the responsibility of the employee.
Then I would like wording to say something like that instead of exercising this benefit may be required, because I just think we need to be clear that it's not required and it's not a benefit.
So I guess to me, it looks clear. Employees exercising this benefit may be required to provide the students transportation to and from school. Because we have to, we'll help them if we can.
More often than not, it's the employee exercising this benefit will be required to provide transportation.
We can change it to will.
I mean, I'm just throwing that out there because I did, and whenever we have maybe, then we get down to lots of discretionary things. And
I agree. I think, it should be clear that transportation is not required or is not provided.
So take out may be and put are. Employees exercising this benefit are required to provide the students transportation to and from school.
yes. And if you can work it out, be like if they appeal or if whatever process you have to meet those, like that example you just gave, if there's room on the bus, if there's already a route, then certainly we don't want to, we want to be accommodating to our employees, but we shouldn't have to, and they should be okay with that and not like, can't believe Julie Barnum didn't let me have this, but she let Stephanie have that, blah, blah, and that's it, those kind of things, parents are our own worst enemies and we're all our own worst enemies when it comes to that comparing.
No, I agree. Transportation, by rule is not provided. The exception is if they request transportation, we look at it to determine if there's a route and a stop and space. So that makes sense to me.
So however we need to word that, Julie / Eddie / McKenna, to just sort of clean that up a little bit, that would feel better for me.
Just take out maybe and put are required or will be required.
Yeah, and then let us work out any extenuating circumstances.
Yeah.
I think it's better to make sure that the onus is on the employee to for the transportation.
Right, and not us to try and make it work.
Right.
And then one last, this is like just sort of ask the question in it's way down on page 3. It's number 2, other admissions.
Yeah, I had a couple of other suggestions on this policy.
Okay. The so other admissions, it's got a C with the line struck through it, so I'm not certain if it's an A or if it's just a plain. Where it says a non-domiciled student may be enrolled. I don't know what the 1 means. To provide continuous, whatever that statement was. So I was not quite certain I understood what that was. And then compelling need or hardship is demonstrated. I mean, do we have to be more, what is a hardship to some people is not a hardship to like you and
the hardships are defined in the student assignment plan, so there's no ambiguity.
Okay.
And as an example to that, that would be if we have a student that has been enrolled with us, let's say, this gives us an opportunity to maintain enrollment for a kid, for example, if they've been enrolled with us in Myrtle Grove Middle School and their house burns down and they move to Brunswick County for 4 months while their house is being rebuilt, we can maintain their enrollment as a non-domiciled student because it's the continuous progress of them because they moved either to and from the school system during the school year, but we know that they're returning.
Okay.
And then,
okay. I now see what that 1 meant. I didn't see the 2.
Yeah.
It was numbered, sorry.
And then 2, if there's, a specific or compelling hardship. Does that answer that one?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, that next one, any reason having to do with athletics, I would recommend in order to match the wording in our hardship guidelines, that say any reason having to do solely with athletics or participation in athletics. I would add after that.
Yeah. Folks are going to do whatever they have to say in order to be on the sports team that they want to be on.
But that's the exact language in our hardship guidelines, and I would recommend that we maintain that.
Okay.
Add that in there.
So having to do solely with athletics?
Yes.
So Julie, if a student does a completion of the school year, whether it's in district or out of district, and they're an athlete, they would still be eligible to participate. Is that correct?
Yes, because that would be a completion of school year. They would, yes.
Thank you.
Then next thing, moving on down that next section, B, admission requirements. The one we have listed as 4, if a student's transferring from another school system in North Carolina, they must submit a release approved by the Board of Education of the other school system for which the transfer is made available or is being made. The only students that we accept from out of county are employee benefits. So should we mention that, or is that something that needs to be discussed?
And I thought, yeah, because it was employee benefit, but I thought over the years that there were compelling reasons that, it happened in athletics, a student lived with their grandmother in Pender County, but came here to play sports on one of our teams. So they were allowed to pay tuition somehow and come to our school system.
Right. We haven't done any tuition spots. So I don't know if that's something that we need to discuss broader than the policy. So I can leave that alone if you'd rather.
Yeah, Julie, I mean, I think that you and I have had discussion about the CTEC. I mean, there's some out of county students that attend there, so.
True. Okay. Excellent point.
And for some reason, I wrote notes right next to that same thing you're talking about with, tuition policy, 4135, that why would we ever charge tuition if we're not allowing them in?
So I think probably maybe we will allow.
Okay. Or we're leaving ourselves open that we could.
Yeah.
Is that what? Okay. So do we need to reference in here anywhere, the tuition policy will, for the discretionary admission?
I think actually, given what Deborah reminded me of, I think maybe we just leave it as it is.
Okay.
So the next one, or if that's okay with that one.
Yeah.
The next one, number 5. Would this not be the educational affidavit? It says a notarized written document. Are we referring to the educational affidavit? And should we say that? Because we haven't been accepting just a written document.
Yeah, so I don't think that this is referring to the educational affidavit that you use to determine whether someone's eligible for admission. I think this is referring to the authorization to make educational decisions, which is has a different purpose.
So okay, that confused me because of the admission policy.
So I'll let McKenna address that. I mean, I think that the way this policy is structured, your discretionary admission criteria are a lot more limited than what would normally be found. And so some of these things, as you recognized, might not make a lot of sense. But I'll let McKenna address that language since that's from the standard policy.
Yeah, that's just so you're letting the kid lives with grandma and mom and dad live in New York. If you're letting that kid in because they live there with grandma, you don't want to have to be going to mom and dad who live far away to get permission for things. You in order to let this kid come to your school, you would want that grandma can make all decisions for the kid. So that's what that's asking for, is authorization to give grandma the right to make all the educational decisions.
And then if there's a problem, then there's an appeal process somewhere. Like, let's say that, my kids living with grandma and grandma's going off the deep end in my opinion. Like, I haven't abdicated my rights as a parent, right? Just because they're living with somebody else.
We're not, you haven't given up custody rights. It's just saying you're authorizing grandma to make decisions.
Okay.
So that's included in the educational residency affidavit document. So if we have that for enrollment, it's included in that, where the parent and the parent, guardian, and legal custodian, and then also the other one, the other parent. So it says, I hereby give the caregiver adult that has accepted responsibility for educational decisions. So I guess okay. I think I'm still confused, but that's okay. If it needs to be in the policy, I can figure out the application and logistics of compliance later.
Yeah, we can talk, Julie, but I think the the affidavit you're talking about is that would be someone applying because they think they have a right to be admitted based on one of the statutory factors. And this is under discretionary admission. So there wouldn't, I don't know that there would necessarily be an affidavit for a discretionary admission, although again, because you are limiting your discretionary admission to a really limited set of circumstances, although it could be. So for example, I think if the non-domiciled student under the two other admissions whose family has to move out, or maybe the family moves out, but the child stays with a different family because the family has to be split up because their temporary housing isn't going to accommodate everyone, then maybe there's a need for that. There's no residency affidavit completed to allow them to come. It's just discretionary, but
So the one I'm talking about is above the discretionary. It's not in the discretionary section. It's number 5 above that. But it's okay. As if I can work around the application of this later.
McKenna, how does this relate to the North Carolina High School Athletic Association policy at the bottom where it says participation in athletics in regards to domicile and residency requirements?
Where are you looking? I'm sorry, what?
I'm in paragraph 5 towards the bottom. Reading this, it seems as if somebody can just sign off and have something notarized, and then it would allow them to make decisions regarding extracurricular activities and also participation in athletics. And I don't know that it's that simple from the High School Athletic Association point of view, but I don't know if this supersedes.
I don't think they're talking about, it's not saying that then that would give you the right to be eligible to play under the Athletic Association rules. It's just saying like, you then have the right to give your kid permission to participate.
Okay.
But if you're not eligible under the rules, you're not eligible.
Okay. Thank you.
So in that same section, the number 7 that we've struck out, I thought at the last meeting we talked about that a little bit, and I was wondering why number 7 was struck out. If the student is asserting residency in the school system, sufficient evidence must be provided with the initial application, such as a copy of utility bills. I thought that Ms. Varnum had talked with us about that last time, that was still a requirement.
Are you allowing, so if there is somebody who is not domiciled in your school system who has no right to go to your school because they're domiciled somewhere else, but they're living within your school system, there's a difference between residency and domicile. So like if mom and dad live in Pender County and the kid's living with grandma in New Hanover, the kid is not domiciled in New Hanover. They're domiciled in Pender where mom and dad live. If they still, mom and dad have custody and everything, they just happen to be living with grandma. Would you allow that kid in?
No, not unless the educational residency was completed and there was some reason.
Okay.
Even in those, there may be reasons if they check some of those that we would refer that to DSS for support.
So that's why I think I got rid of that, because you don't allow that.
Okay, so maybe that's addressed in another policy somewhere else, because we all know that happens, and it's just a matter of time before they get caught that they're doing that.
And
yeah, they're asserting domicile though.
This policy is all about kids who are not entitled to be enrolled in the school district, but are allowed to under certain specific circumstances. So they don't have to prove residency because they don't have a right to attend. They're just being allowed to attend.
Right.
So that requirement would be found in the policy that determines your right, your eligibility to enroll no matter what.
Okay, okay. So the word, we took that out because of residency versus domicile?
Well, I think you took it out because you don't have to, under this policy, you don't live, you're not making a claim that you live in New Hanover County. You're entitled to enroll because your parent works there in the school district, or because you are, so you don't have to prove enrollment.
Okay.
Or residency, I'm sorry.
Okay, there's a lot in here. Did anybody have anything else, or are we ready to put it on for first reading?
So what did we decide on that? The, Julie's gonna clean up the chart, and the chart's gonna go in the assignment plan? Is that what we
Yes.
decided?
I think that's what we agreed on.
So the chart comes out of policy. That sentence above the chart says the student assignment plan describes which schools are considered. And then we add solely to the sentence regarding athletics. And then everything else is good.
Okay, one last thing, and the last paragraph, it's number 3 of section B, number 3, where it talks about renewals. When I was reading the criteria, admission criteria must be in good standing in terms of academics, discipline, and other measures for standing and progress. Do we not want to just list out specifically attendance and tardiness? Like continual attendance, you have to have good attendance and no persistent pattern of tardiness, even though that could come under other measures of standing and progress. But I would like to see that one, because that seems to be where we also, like in schools of choice, if you're not meeting attendance and tardy requirements, then you can't come, you're not supposed to be able to come back.
Yeah, I think it'd be fine to say academics, discipline, attendance, and other measures.
Okay,
That's fine.
yeah.
Let's do it.
And that's in the renewals paragraph?
Yeah, it's B3,
Mhm.
and it's called renewals. So it really would be like on almost the last line, the 1, 2, 3, 4th line of that paragraph, right after discipline.
Julie, under renewals, is the application just the hardship application that they're referring to?
I think it could be application or any hardship or any other discretionary admission. So if that was, an enrollment for a non-domiciled student or any, I think it could be any that would fit.
Thanks.
So the application really is for like a school employee benefit application, right? Because that's what we're talking about in this policy for the most part.
It could be employee benefit. It could be any other admission for a non-domiciled.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Are we good? Going once. All right, policy 4130 will be put on the agenda for first reading at the upcoming meeting. That takes us down to policy 4135, tuition for discretionary admissions. Ms. Barnum, I thought you had just mentioned, correct me if I'm wrong, that we don't do tuition for discretionary admissions.
Well, we hadn't, but I think in the past there was a time before I was in the district. We don't have a mechanism for that now, but I don't think that means, that we can't. So I think this is just
A just in case policy?
bringing a policy forward in case that's the will of the board.
I don't mind having a policy that covers it, just, in case it happens. I don't really have anything to add to this, because I didn't think we did it very often.
I just have one question about the first chunk, tuition, where tuition may be waived, and you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, line number 6. And then we have the next section, in addition, no tuition will be charged. And number 1, they say these same things. So why do we have it listed twice?
Well, it says no tuition will be charged to full-time employees. Number 6, I don't know. We can get rid of it, but do you have part-time employees where you wouldn't, it's not an automatic?
I mean, we do.
Or just change number 6 to, or you can get rid of number 1, either way, or leave it.
Well, if that's the case, does this apply to substitute teachers?
I don't believe it does. I mean, we've never done that in the past, have we, Julie?
I don't think so.
Well, just because we haven't done it in the past doesn't mean it might not be one of those ones that come up. And I just get real concerned that substitute teachers are employees for some things and they're not employees for others, for other policies. So I'm just trying to clear that up, because people have asked that forever, and myself included when I was a sub, even though none of these applied to me. I was just listening.
Let me just respond, and then certainly Deborah can jump in. This is Mary Hazel, by the way, if y'all can't tell.
Yeah.
The categories of employment are defined in state board policy. And so certainly they're employees, they get paid, but
Right.
they don't have any benefit rights. And there is, once you sign up to be a sub, you could always choose not to work. So somebody could sign up to be a sub, and we have hired them, and they could turn down every sub assignment. And then they then have these benefits. So, those are things we need to discuss. But we probably do need to have a separate discussion about the state employment categories.
Okay. So I don't know that we need to have that as part of this policy, but yeah, I would like to at some point figure out, just so we can be a little bit more clear on employment status of substitute teachers. And then, so back to my original question, do we need line number 6 in the first little section in addition to number 1 in the second little section?
I would just say, if you are going to get rid of 6, you may want to get rid of full-time in number 1 that follows, if you are not going to charge tuition. Otherwise, if you're going to charge or potentially charge tuition for someone who's an employee but not a full-time employee, I think that's why number 6 is there at all.
Okay.
Agree.
So it doesn't matter to me which one we take out, or just clean up, or if you guys think it's okay to have them both, I understand why it's not really redundant because of a couple words. So I can do either one. I just wanted to ask the question.
Okay, I would just keep it.
Okay. Just one question on the tuition rate. How is that calculated? Is that a Mary Hazel, like she just
assume
whips
that's
it up?
I was just thinking about it, because we haven't done it in so many years, and generally when we did it, it was only if there was somebody who was having to attend from like out of the country, and I can't remember the reasons why, because it was so long ago.
So, and in a lot of cases that, I think that the board sets the tuition rate based on what the local dollars are for per student for that year. I think there's a calculation, but again.
Because the state funds we would get state funds based on that child's enrollment. We just wouldn't, the county, the child doesn't reside in the county, so that would be the reason to charge tuition.
Right. It would be no more than that local per pupil allocation.
And so like when it says you have to report to the board, would that just be like a Mary Hazel giving a report that says hello board, I'm here tonight and this is what our tuition rates are going to be if we have to use them?
It could be as simple as stating that it's the per pupil, the county per pupil. Well, I'm trying to think how to word it, but
The local per pupil allocation for current
Yes, yeah.
expense.
the same one that we use for determining, how much charter schools get. So yeah, just
Right.
a per pupil calculation of the local appropriation would be the actual language.
And under the policy, it says the tuition rate will be determined annually by the board no later than August 1st. And I think that's consistent with the board having to set fees every year.
Oh, okay. So it should be included as something like that. Okay. Because I wouldn't have any idea if you're bringing this to me, us, and I'm going, okay, it sounds good to me because you did your homework. All right.
So
that's
it-
all.
What are just so I understand the purpose of this policy, what are the situations that y'all foresee students enrolling that would qualify for us charging tuition?
I don't think I think we were saying, Ms. Hazel, this is just a policy that we have just in case. I don't think there's any, I don't think there's any good answer to that.
It would worry me that if we have the policy, and maybe there's good reason to have it, but then people just start applying to go to school here. And maybe we want that because our enrollment's low, but I just wondering what the vision was.
Well, I think that it is a little bit confused. So under the discretionary admission policy we just reviewed, it says special permission for discretionary admission may be granted only upon recommendation by the superintendent and approval by the board. So that leaves open the door for certain students to be allowed discretionary admission, even if they don't meet any of the other requirements in the policy. But then you go to the tuition policy and you've got, they're admitted by an agreement with another board of education, and there's tuition required or not required, I'm sorry. The student resides on a military base. So someone could look at this policy and think about, well, these are categories under which I could get discretionary admission. And I think that it would be my only concern about this policy is that it sets out more, I think, circumstances under which discretionary admission might be granted than your discretionary admission policy does.
Would your recommendation be to get rid of this policy then?
Not necessarily. I'm just not sure, again, how the interaction of the two really works. And I know, again, you do need to have a tuition policy in the event that you have someone who is getting enrollment that is not entitled to enrollment.
And I think that is what I was kind of referring to when I asked the question about tuition in the last policy was, do we even have to say, tuition may be required, as part of this discretionary admission? But we were completely silent on it, and then we come to the next policy that says, oh, if you get in, you may have to pay, but you may not have to pay.
I think if we approve it, if y'all approve it now, my concern is until we have an agreement, number one, with Pender County, then we would have to charge the students who go to CTEC, and I don't think that's your intent right now, but maybe it is.
But I thought we had an MOU that's how the school got set up. It was going to be for both of our counties, and it would just be managed by New Hanover County.
There's not currently an MOU in place regarding student admission.
They won't sign it.
Pardon me?
They won't sign.
I've been in communication with the attorney for the Pender County Board of Education and talking to LaShawn and to Julia about that situation, and hopefully we'll have some clarity, but at this point, there's no MOU in place.
Dang, I thought that was part of the reason that we were able to open it and we were able to call it Southeastern area because of that whole, all of that.
I mean,
I think that was the intent of the legislature, that it served both counties, but my only thought is, until that's resolved, do you want to hold this? But if you don't, that's fine.
I don't think those two are related, but if this policy is approved, I do think we'll need some procedures, because I imagine that will be something I will need to manage, and I'll just need some direction on that. So, but again, I just yield to the decision of the board.
I would be just as comfortable not approving it and putting it on hold for right now while we figure it out.
I think that's smart. I don't want to pass something where we're not 100% sure of how it's going to look after it's passed. So
Right.
let's pull this and wait, if that's all right.
I'm okay with that.
Okay, we'll bring this back up. We are moving on now to school assignment 4150. Ms. Farnham, this is sort of where you live and breathe, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Stephanie, you haven't had one of these yet, but man.
Well,
we
I
go through
have
this
been
cycle.
involved in a bunch of these things from the parent side, not in the weeds like you guys are, but these kind of things just chap my craw, when when we have to debate about people's integrity.
Ms. Farnham, would you take us through, was there anything you saw here that you wanted to address? I'm sure we had some stuff.
Actually, no. It's pretty good to me. The only one that I did have a question about, I'm trying to find the one. It's in E. Oh, I'm in the wrong section. I wanted to make sure that we were in line with the North Carolina High School Athletic Association under transfers down here in section E. I know it was mentioned in a prior policy, but want to make sure that the language of the prior one about not being transferring in the same athletic season and participating on two different teams.
Yes.
I don't know if that needs to be included here or maybe just cross-reference to 3620.
McKenna, could you just add a cross-reference on that?
Yeah, do you want the cross-reference just in the cross-references or in the text of the policy?
I always prefer to keep them at the bottom.
I think that
Okay.
would be good.
Well, and I always disagree with you guys on that, is that especially, I mean, if we're referencing it at the bottom, then we should have some text in the policy to indicate why we are cross-referencing that. And that is an issue about people trying to transfer, to different schools, in order to, like in college, you have to sit out. I don't know if we have to sit out in high school or not, but
That's covered under the North Carolina High School Athletics Association. So I don't, again, a lot of times make these, I think, a little too wordy, trying to cover any and all eventualities when the High School Athletics Association's already covered it for us.
So the association does speak to this in their policy as well, about playing in two sports seasons in the same year, and that is prohibited. I think that's what Julie was referencing. But in regards to the other question, a student does have to sit out for 365 days, but it also says the LEA can create for immediate athletic eligibility for transfers within the LEA, which I think is what we're speaking to. So, so basically the association is going to defer to our local policy as to a transfer within our LEA.
so I think we should have some wording about that then. and wherever we want to put it, but I think we should
What would you like to add?
kind of like what Mr. O'Brien just said, that this is what you can do and what you can't do. I mean, if you're transferring, whatever the rule is, that we have to, because people look to the policy. A lot of folks don't even, they're not even, especially in high school, and then some of the calls and questions we've been getting about different decisions that have been being made recently. Some of them were high school boards, schools association, sports association rules, and some of them were our rules. And so I just think we need to be clear what our policy is, or that we are going to uphold and just say it out loud, because people will do whatever they can to get around the rules and to be able to play at the high school where they want to play in the sport that they want to play in. I mean, it happens all the time.
It does?
Yes.
I don't think we have had gaps in our policy or process. I think that, the issues that have come up are when people are wanting to go around the policy.
Right.
And get what they want, but I don't think it's a policy issue. I think that's just about us maintaining compliance on the policies. But I do, it does say the state making 3 or 4 under other transfers. Superintendent shall consider requests, blah, 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 as provided in the student assignment plan. And the student assignment plan does lay out further, how we apply the policy. So if there's a question about the application of the policy, we might want to look at the student assignment plan at some time, just to see how it goes, how it helps with the compliance of it. So I think that's what you're talking about a little bit.
Okay.
Also, I just want to point out that the more places you are repeating information that is coming from, like, say, the High School Athletic Association that has to be followed, the more places you're putting it in the policy, you then need to be really careful about making sure, if the High School Athletic Association updates what their rule is, you need to go back everywhere you put it in your policy and make sure it's consistent, because you don't want people to be like, oh, well, look, your policy says this, but your policy is now outdated, and that's why it says it.
Well, that's what we'll use you for temporarily, to help us with that. But good point. All right, so on this policy, I have a question. Where do we address the turning in students who are supplying false information about their domicile?
I don't think that's something that we can put into a policy.
Julie mentioned, when we talked about this before, she said something about complaints can be handled by the office of the assistant superintendent so I think we need to have that line in there, and I didn't see where we had it.
So we do
talk about it.
All kinds of options for folks to, report policy compliance concerns to us. There can be an Ethics 360 complaint, which we have gotten those, saying, hey, so-and-so is lying about their address. We get them by phone call, by email, however they come in. And so I will lean on you guys for that.
All we need is a one line to say that's how you do it. Pardon me?
We do investigate any policy issue.
Right.
So I don't know how you want that put in there.
In policy, in the domicile policy about admissions, you added in, I think this is what you're thinking of, in 4120, you added concerns regarding false domicile may be reported to the assistant superintendent of student support.
Yes.
Would you like to add that into this policy also?
I think we should put that, or again, do what you guys do and just put it in the cross-reference, just so folks know that when they're looking at this, because they may not go to that policy, they may see school assignment and we'll just look it up there.
Do you want to cross-reference domicile policy?
if that's where you've just described that wording, then yes.
Okay.
Me personally, but others, Julie and Nelson weigh in.
I'm fine with that language.
Agree.
Okay, then, so in section B, that paragraph that has all the, all the reds in there, where the sentence I'm looking at is, however, students may apply for assignment to magnet schools outside of their attendance zone and to year-round schools through the lottery. Does non-magnet schools, I'm not certain what that means other than just a regular school, but what comes to my mind is applying to the high school specialty programs and their specific application processes. Do we need to put that in there somewhere? Like Lyceum, the IB, at Laney, it's the STEM, at Ashley, it's the marine science, and others may, pop up.
Again, I mean, if you want to put it in, let's put it in. I really don't think we have to be that specific in our policies. But if you'd like to put it in.
Right, that's included in the student assignment plan.
But so I guess what my question is, the assignments to non-magnet and magnet schools. So why do we write that? Why don't we just say then schools outside of their normal attendance zone? Because there's some kids who don't live in the Ashley School District that are going to apply to go to the marine science. And these are all things that are evolving in our school system. And if we've got all these choices and all these options, they have different nuances. And I just think that we need to be more intentional about recognizing we have all these choices, and a lot of unintended consequences may come out because we don't want to be specific about some stuff.
Yeah, again, I mean, if you want to put them in, that would be fine. I just don't think we need to be that detailed, because it's not just our policies that are governing our school system. It's state statutes, it's regulations, the student assignment plan.
But this isn't a state statute. This is something we have created in our own school system.
Right. No, I'm saying in general, we have, the policy isn't the only thing that exists. I just don't, like I said, if you want to put it in, I'll support that. Fine, let's put it in.
So I guess my question would be, is there a way other than the lottery to apply to other schools?
Yes, there's an application process. There's not a lottery.
So, I mean, it may make more sense to say, however, students may apply for assignment to, and as you said, scratch out non-magnet, magnet, just say schools outside of their attendance areas, and to year-round schools through the applicable register application process established in wherever it's found, instead of getting into the details about every single different type of application process, whether it's the lottery or application or any other way. And that way there's, again, in regulation or the application student assignment plan, wherever that's found, you could reference it.
So outside of hardship, there are only lottery options, which would be open choice, and that's based on space. And hardship is based on space as well, but that follows the hardship guidelines. So I think the wording is accurate. It's just that the information regarding the nuances, I think, of each of the scenarios is in the student assignment plan, because that's able to be edited and clarified to consider all of the different types of scenarios. Again, it's a multi-page document, and I'm happy to share it, kind of outlining. And I think that's where there can be some more specifics. But if it's determined that you want more language in here, I would say we need to use the language from the student assignment plan.
Julie, is the open choice and the lottery the same?
Yes.
Same thing? Okay.
Yes.
So are our specialty programs considered open choice?
So
it depends. So the signature programs,
sorry.
yeah, those signature programs, and I don't know if Mr. O'Brien's on here. The signature programs operate differently than open choice because it's a right. So you get to apply to those, and the way they communicate those is actually it's within their attendance zone. So they're available for the entire attendance zone. So they don't have to be like an open choice or lottery. So Mr. O'Brien, do you want to clarify that?
Sure. So we do allow students from outside of the district school to make application for those programs. And I'd probably have to defer to Denise. I know she's not on the call, but I do think that they apply first for the program. And then if they're accepted to the program, they are typically allowed to attend.
Yes. Yes. So that's really considered, the signature programs are really considered a part of their district-wide options. And so they're not open choice or lottery. They're a right if they get accepted into the program.
So where do we address that? Because I mean, those are the kinds of little, I mean, you guys have just explained some little tiny detail, and a lot of parents won't understand that. They'll think that they're just not getting in, or they might get an answer, there's not room, so therefore you can't come to this signature program. So I just think that when the more cool things that we create, we can't just let them flounder out there because you at your level understand all of it, because parents don't.
So on our webpage, and when we have the conversations with our middle schools about recruiting for signature programs, and on our webpage regarding enrollment and registration, we don't list the policy. We have the student assignment plan, which details out the kind of things that we're talking about. So we don't reference the policy for the parents. The student assignment plan references the policy, but when it comes to parents and their information, we don't, the policy isn't what's public facing to them. The student assignment plan that lays out the nuances of all the different types of ways to be enrolled in different schools is what's laid out for them. And so I think it just depends on what audience you're creating this for. So do you want the school assignment policy and the student assignment plan to be a mirror of each other? Or do you want the school assignment plan, which kind of is in more parent-friendly terms and student-friendly terms, to be used to outline how they get enrolled at different schools and to include all the nuances, and that be referenced in the policy? So I think it's really just up to the board's determination on how you want that laid out in the wording.
All right. Well, I just learned something new, because I thought the school assignment plan and the student assignment plan were the same thing.
I'm sorry. I'm using those words synonymously. They are. Student assignment plan is what I'm referring to. Sorry.
And so how is that different from the school? And so student assignment plan and school assignment. Student assignment plan is a regulation and the school assignment is a policy. Is that the difference?
So school assignment 4150 is policy. The student assignment plan is what I'm referring to as regulation.
Okay.
So if you want.
No, that's fine. I just didn't know that they were two different documents. Because they're pretty similar in name, but they're very different in what they do.
Well, so I want to clarify. So right here in this policy, right here in part that's on the screen in the biggest red paragraph under B, the last sentence, reassignments or transfers back to the original assigned school are permitted only as provided in the student assignment plan approved by the board. So the student assignment plan, and when I have said school assignment plan, I'm sorry, I'm only meaning student assignment plan. That's the regulation part. That's the only document that and that reference, and then the hardship guidelines are the only regulation documents that we use for school assignment. School assignment 4150 is the new policy, and of course we had been using 8120, 8130, and so the student assignment plan captures all of the different areas of how students are enrolled in different schools. So it captures employee benefit, it captures signature programs, magnet, non-magnet lottery, open choice, all of that. So lottery is only used when we have enough open choice applications that we need to have a fair approval process.
Right. So if I could, I think this may help to clarify is if instead of saying through the lottery in that sentence, you say, you know, students may apply as provided in the student assignment plan. And then that tells parents where to go look to apply for assignment outside of their attendance area or to any other school. Instead of referencing the lottery, which might be a little confusing if people don't know where that originates from. So if you say just students may apply for reassignment to schools outside their attendance areas and year-round schools as provided in the student assignment plan, period. And then they know where, you know, you've got that other reference to where to go.
So I have I like that wording, thank you, because it does make it just a little bit more clear on that. But in that, when it's in that last sentence that we were just talking about, Julie, where you said the student assignment plan is approved by the board, but the student assignment plan is a regulation. And I was under the impression that the school board only approves policies. We do not have to approve your regulation, that is under Dr. Faust's purview, and he and his staff come up with regulations. So why would we be approving those?
I'm just going to speak from what I understand. I understand that you approve those because of what McKenna described earlier, that student assignment is actually under the obligation of the board. And so I think that makes this different. McKenna or Deborah, do you want to add in?
Yeah, the student assignment plan is not, it's not just a regulation. It is in fact a decision of the board that the board has to make under a statute to assign students to schools. That's the duty of the board. And so I'm not sure it's accurate to call the student assignment plan a regulation. It's more detailed and it's not a policy, but it's assignment of students to schools by the board.
So has that come before us, this committee, to look at recently? And I'm just cluing out and zoning and not paying attention, that I haven't seen this and enough to know that there's a difference between two things that we're looking at right now?
So you haven't seen the 21-22 one yet. Once policies are ready, that one can come back. But the board does approve them. And so the 2021 one was already approved.
And so where would I find that?
It's on our webpage. I can also send you one.
Okay, no, I just want what I'm trying to do as we're going through this is, if I can't find it, then I'm going to assume that a lot of other parents who and people with interest are not going to be able to find it either. I mean, not that I'm probably middle of the road on how to find things, but if I can't find it, then there's probably half of the community that can't find it either.
So, okay.
See where I'm coming from? Just to make it clear on how, on just how to find it. And it's a little difficult while we're in the middle of transitioning to find that. So I just want to make it easy and make our wording, because we do have some confusing wording in the school system, things that sound alike but are very different. You know, just to make sure that we're actually looking at the right thing before people start complaining. You know, that maybe they're not even looking at the right document. I mean, do you see where I'm coming from? And not just to be like a thorn kind of thing.
Sure. I think I might not have the same lens because, yeah, but I could certainly work on that.
Okay. All right. So the last question I have is in section C, under the number 2 that was struck out. The last sentence in that paragraph says, if the application for reassignment is disapproved, the board shall give notice to the applicant. And then in the next paragraph, the second sentence says, the board or the panel of the board will hear the appeal. So it was my understanding that if you appealed your assignment, it went to you, the director of, I mean, the assistant superintendent for student support, and you sent the letter out, and then people had the chance to appeal to us. So if we're saying no, and then we're also hearing the appeals, it just seems like there needs to be a step in between. Do you see what I'm talking about?
Not quite.
Okay,
I'm
so
looking at
in
this
that paragraph right underneath it where we struck out number 2,
section.
if you go down to the very last sentence, if the application for reassignment is disapproved, the board will give notice to the applicant by registered or certified mail. Okay, so that sounds good until you read down into the next paragraph. The second sentence says that the board or a panel of the board will hear a parent's appeal. So I was under the understanding that if you, and maybe I'm wrong, that your office determines the approves or disapproves reassignment requests. And so then your office sends out the letter, or the superintendent sends out the letter, and then not the board, and then the parent has the right to appeal to the board.
So I guess I'm reading that in the same way, where the student assignments are ultimately our responsibility, that Ms. Varnum is doing that as sort of the board's designee. Is that an appropriate way to look at that, Ms. Varnum?
That's the way I see it, but I would want Deborah or McKenna to weigh in on why that's worded that way.
We can change that to the superintendent's going to send the notice.
In
Okay.
practicality, that's how it happens. I just,
Okay.
Right,
we
I
can
mean, like,
change that.
if that's how it's happening, and we're okay with making the wording say that, then I think we should say what we're doing.
But I guess my only question is, it's pretty clear to me that this is an area that is the purview of the board. This is how we elected to do it. So if we go and say, well, the superintendent is sending it, that seems problematic.
Well, I come back to the part where when we have to get basic information in closed session about personnel matters or student kind of things, that we are only supposed to hear certain amount of information so that we are ready to hear an appeal should one happen. So am I misinterpreting that, Deborah?
No, you're right, Ms. Crable. When the board hears an appeal, it is from, so the decision, again, going back to the board has adopted a student assignment plan, and the parent requests the reassignment under that student assignment plan that is the board's plan. As a practical matter, the administration has to carry out that plan because the board is making those day-to-day decisions. And that's why, I think that's why it says the board will give notice, but it is the board that hears the appeal. The board doesn't, the administration is acting for the board in that case. But I'm going to take a quick look at the statute. I don't think there's any problem with saying, or you could just sort of elide the issue and say, if the application for reassignment is disapproved, the parent shall receive notice by registered or certified mail, or the applicant shall receive notice by registered or certified mail.
Let's do it that way. Let's do it that way. Just take out the board.
I just hate, people.
Because it is awkward to hear your own appeal.
Right, that's what I'm saying, is that's,
So let's do it that way.
Because you've already, the implication is you already have a bias because you said no. So now I got to come back and talk to you again.
McKenna, any problem with doing it that way?
Nope, no problem.
All right, 4150. I think we're good there.
Nelson, I
Anything
forgot.
else?
There's one more. I turned the page. So it's in number 2 of that of D, where we're talking about unsafe school choice transfers. And and I know we're going to talk about that in the next policy, but this is one thing that we have talked about in the Title IX committee that I just wanted to see how it applied in regular policy. So what about if these violent crimes we're talking about have occurred outside of school, but the students still attend the same school? So they still have to be around each other. You know,
So the Title IX, the new guidance that came down in August limited it seemed to Jarrell and I, at least, that it limited what we could do if something were to take place off campus. There have been cases, I think one was the University of Kansas, where even in that ruling, it gave the University of Kansas, it gave the institution some leeway to say, okay, what happened off campus doesn't mean that we can't handle it. But I think we've kind of been hemmed in by that Title IX language, that new Title IX guidance that came down. I think.
I'm only
can't
bringing
remember.
it up because we have talked about this specifically in the Title IX committee, and Jarrell is very aware of it. And it is one of the areas that is being looked at for our survey. And so that is and that might have been discussed, Ms. Barnum, when you were handling, some of it seems like every time we talk about something really critical, there's an emergency going on and you have to quickly listen. So that may be something we have to talk about with Jarrell, but that is definitely being discussed in the Title IX committee. So that's why I brought it up. So, I mean, we don't have to change anything about it right now. That is it is on two different screens.
So, Ms. Crandall, I think that this provision under the unsafe school transfer choice is a very specific right to have a transfer in certain cases. It doesn't mean that other issues of violence or safety can't be considered by the board in making transfers, but this is directed to a very specific right under federal law to transfer schools. And that, so it's a slightly different situation, and it wouldn't affect other opportunities for a student to be considered for a transfer if that's what the board wanted to do.
Okay.
And I think I'll ask McKenna to confirm that's the case.
Yeah, this is just talking about the federal law that requires this. And it's actually my understanding that because of the way it's been defined, that it's not actually something, I don't know, Julie, is this true that do you ever actually transfer kids? Do you ever have schools that are designated as persistently dangerous?
We don't.
It's a hard standard to meet, and so it's not really used, but you have to have it for federal law.
Right. We don't have that situation, but we do have the hardship transfer option for a student who's experienced some type of traumatic situation, and we can make a school assignment change. That's also something that Jarrell and I have worked together on for intermittent supports and stepping in to support a student who has experienced some type of traumatic or violent situation, Title IX related. If I'm working with Jarrell, it's been Title IX related, and making a school assignment option for them. So we're not limited to that, and I don't think this limits that.
Okay, no, that just popped into my head because of recent discussions. So I'm good with that.
Okay. And Ms. Crable, I don't think I understood about the emergency situation you were talking about a little earlier. So
What
maybe.
No, I'll tell you later.
Oh, okay.
No, it had nothing to do with this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, is that it for 4150 school assignment? All right, we will put that on the agenda for first reading. 4152 unsafe school choice transfer. I'll start with Ms. Martin. Ms. Martin, did you have anything here?
I don't have anything on this one. I don't have anything on this one because I think this also is what McKenna was just talking about. We don't have, not to say we won't, but we don't have the persistently dangerous criteria. But of course, we need to have this in the event that this type of situation does occur.
Okay,
I just
Ms.
had a
Grable?
question about letter B in the school review of the violent criminal offenses. The, where it says it's the second line, the principal and the school improvement team shall review the incident, whether the conditions or procedures at the schools, are met. I just had a question about the school improvement team, that if that was something that we really do, what we would do. And is there anything in here that, because school improvement teams include parents on there. So I didn't know if there was any HIPAA, FERPA, any sort of, violation of students or families' rights where we had the school improvement team. I mean, that caught my eye because there's parents on that team.
Right. So in practicality, I think certainly it having a confidentiality agreement, but also not using personally identifiable information any more than you have to really understand an incident. But it is my understanding with regard to the general statute, and again, McKenna and Deborah, when you've had a violent criminal offense, and again, this does align with policy 4300, where behavior management plans are part of what the school needs to complete every year, and then that would be attached to the school improvement plan. Having the discussion on if a school becomes persistently dangerous or has had a violent criminal offense on property, you do want it examined to determine if there are other ways that either supervision needs to be set up or other expectations. And so I think that's a part of the persistently dangerous requirements.
Okay, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
It just sort of struck me as like, wow, I've been on the school improvement team, for a long time, from my kids start to finish. And, I would think that we shied away from those kind of things. And those discussions were had at a non-school improvement team staff meeting, and we would specifically would not talk about those kind of things.
So again, those behaviors or those criminal offenses are listed on the first page of this one. And so, for example, if there was a homicide on campus, I believe the school improvement team would talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's about the level of the level of incident.
Okay. And then in letter F, where it talks about the transportation, I know we've talked about that before, where parents would have to transport their own kid if they went to a different school. And I know we just said that parent, that for all changes, you're responsible for your own transportation. I would just think that in this particular case, that it's something happening that's traumatic, that we would try and make an effort to get the kid to school, like we do with McKinney-Vento or homeless kids, that we transport them, even though it's a pain, to do. Because this to me seems like one of those ones that this was completely out of the child's, control. And so I don't know if this is one of those ones that we might want to say that we can consider transportation, or just stay with what we just said on.
I think we would, but I definitely wouldn't put that into the policy. I think we would obviously try to help these students, but I definitely wouldn't put it into the policy, because how can you gauge whether or not we tried?
So I think this is different than if we're talking about the victim of a violent crime. So certainly we handle that differently than if we had a school that was determined or identified as a persistently dangerous school. And then the option is there for any student to go
Okay.
to another school. And that's where transportation is up to the parent. And it's because of the label of the school or the designation based on a violent act on campus. But certainly if it's the victim of a violent act, that's handled very differently.
Okay, and that makes sense because the wording that we wrote there is basically the wording that we are putting into the that employee benefit. You know, you are responsible for your own transportation.
Yes, and this is about if a school is designated as unsafe. So it's not about a victim, but it's about a designation of the school. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. So we will move 4152 on to the agenda for first reading. Policy 4201, injury and loss prevention. I didn't really
I had a
see
bunch
that
of questions on
much
this
here.
one. Especially now that we're
Yeah.
getting a new director of safety. I had several questions that I wanted to bring up. And so, is this in your area, Julie, or is this in Eddie's area
Um,
or
I-
Allison's, perhaps? I don't know.
So, director of safety is in mine, but Eddie and I do share offering direction to that one, but it does fall into student support. And I do have, I don't think Mary Hazel is still on. I think she had another meeting she had to go
Yeah.
to. So, are you
He's
here?
Yes.
Oh, awesome. I have your notes from this one. I don't,
Yeah.
so since you're
I don't
on,
have my notes from that. I sent them to you last night and I don't even have them up. But go ahead.
okay, all right, I've got them right here. I guess, do you want to start, Ms. Craybill, with where your questions are? Or do you want me to mention these comments off the top?
Why don't you go ahead and do yours? Because maybe they'll get mine.
Okay, okay. So the system-wide health and safety leadership team. So we do have twice a year the safety meetings, but I do think I agree with Mary Hazel's suggestion that having an additional review, not with that overall safety group, but having a health and safety leadership team that includes our director of safety, our risk manager, who's Julie Moore, and then benefits supervisor within HR, which would be Heather Listabarger. And so having those three work together in reviewing any I think this falls into not just injury and loss prevention efforts, but also any kind of accident and injury reports that come in.
And that was basically one of my first things was that our district-wide safety team only meets twice a year, and I participate in those as part of the crisis management team. And the first one is basically just training and going over rules, and the second one is a countywide drill. So there's really no discussion of any tracking of trends and at all. So the only person that has privy to that is the safety director, and who he or she, it's a he, we know, so I'll go ahead and say he, who he decides to share that with. So yes, I'm a little concerned that we don't know more, that the board doesn't know more about where our incidents are occurring, like in a trending sort of way, not personal information, but, are we having a lot of hand injuries? Are we, in our maintenance group, are we throwing out our backs because we're doing something, that kind of thing. So yeah, that was one of my first thoughts as well.
And to add to that, our risk manager participating in this, and of course, I think she already works with with the director, but she could provide information for that meeting that might answer some of your questions.
Yep. And I would even throw on a principal, on that committee, just, or a representative from, one of your facility buildings, just to get their input on what's going on, or another way to get information, back out to the safety teams at the schools. But that's for you to decide, not me. So yay.
But do you want, so I hear you mentioning a report of injuries. Does the board want a report back, or are you just talking? I'm trying to.
No, I personally, and we can let Nelson weigh in on this, but as a safety professional, when that was my job, we did it monthly, but hopefully we don't have that many, but even a quarterly report, on where we are, and just to kind of look at the kind of incidents that we're having, whether they be injuries or illnesses or just near miss incidents, because the more you see, what's going on, you may be building up to, like, if it's happening at schools across the county, but we're not really sharing that data anywhere, then the chances of something big happening at another school are just, they keep building upon each other. So it's something that I think that, all schools and buildings should, have information about, even if it's just numbers, not people, and not, not all the details, but if they want them, they know where to get them.
I think that we may have lost Nelson. He's,
Let me, oh, he's calling me right now. Hold on. Hello. No, we're still on, and Deborah just noticed that we lost you. Okay, what do we do? His internet is still on, but his Zoom is not connecting. So
well, he should call in
okay.
Because we've lost a quorum of the committee.
Okay,
So,
all right. So can you call in somehow, because we can't go on if you're not there. Okay. All right. Bye. All right. So I guess we have to hold for a minute while he tries.
We should hold on for a minute.
Okay.
Otherwise, I think that
we have no quorum. It's just me.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm going to vote for all the things I want.
You can still answer, we can still give you information, answer questions, but the committee can't make any decisions going forward without two.
Well, Nelson didn't have any comments on this one. So can I just ask my questions, or should we just wait?
Let's wait and see, because he should be getting that information too, but
right. Okay.
If he can't join in, we have to decide how to proceed.
Making good progress too. I think the rest of these ones coming up are going to go fast.
So far, we haven't made any changes to this, correct?
No. Well, I think we were talking about, and maybe we don't write it, but something about the district-wide safety, defining more what the safety leadership team is. Do we need to put that in there, or just say we will designate one and just kind of put that in procedures?
Okay, yeah, I would say that, it says the superintendent shall establish system-wide health and safety leadership team. And I think you would not want to constrain, unless you do want to constrain the superintendent's discretion on that, but positions change, different roles and job responsibilities change, different people take over different duties. So I think it might be a little bit too detailed to put into policy in that case.
Because we do have a system-wide health and safety leadership team. It's called the district-wide safety team, but it's not necessarily doing what our policy wants it to do.
And so that's a an issue of carrying out the policy or changing the directive to this group so that they do follow policy now that it's been adopted or once it's adopted.
Okay.
Um,
Oh, let me check with Nelson again real quick.
Stephanie,
I'm here.
the reason
I'm
I
here.
was
Oh,
recommending
he's in. Okay.
sorry.
Yeah,
The reason I was recommending those other folks participate was to sort of bring it more in line with what the policy was describing.
No, and I agree with you. I had the exact same comments, in that I had written the same, just being a part of that team, and where we could be better.
They certainly work together, but just making it more formal, I think
Yeah.
is a good idea. Thank you.
Nelson, we didn't do anything. We just sat here and twiddled our thumbs while we were waiting for you.
okay.
Okay, so now we're ready to roll again.
4201.
Yeah, we're still there.
Sorry, I'm on my phone. The joys of
get to hear
online
the-
meeting.
Did you get to hear the discussion about the
I did.
Mary Hazel's suggestions about the district-wide or the system-wide leadership team?
I did.
Okay,
That's fine.
all right. So you want to go next again, Julie?
That was it. And really just, this policy, all of the work within this policy really does fall into the role of the safety director. So, I think, once that starts, then I think we're fine. I don't have any other suggestions.
Okay, so, and I guess what some of the things I was talking about were, again, comes back to the reporting, are we tracking, our injuries, and are we, analyzing for trends? I mean, is that part, and if that's part of the safety director's job, then, and I can certainly follow up, with you offline, on that. But so I talked about that, and then, where it says, so we're in B and paragraph 1, 2, in the second paragraph, about 2/3 of the way down, where it says, the superintendent or designee may appoint site-based safety teams to conduct these activities. So, when it says the superintendent may appoint, I was under the impression that every school was supposed to have a safety team, a safety leadership team. So it's not the superintendent may appoint site-based teams. It's that with superintendent requires that there are site-based teams to look at their own safety issues. So I know we're doing that. Every school has a safety team. How they meet, when they meet, the robustness of their teams are different because that's, they just are. But I think we need to change the wording to not say may appoint, to say that we will have. Does that make sense, or is that okay?
I see what you're saying. I kind of felt like what you were describing falls into that next sentence. If site-based teams are utilized, they shall report to the health and safety leadership team. So I think the appoint part, I think is it's one thing to require a site-based safety team. It's another to appoint a team. And so I don't know if that means appointing the people on the team as opposed to letting the school make that determination.
Oh yeah, no, I maybe I didn't say it right. What I just want the wording to be clear that every school will have a site-based safety team, and the membership does not have to be appointed by the superintendent. It can be the principal and the school improvement team, or or whatever mechanism the school has puts together their team. That I don't want the superintendent to come into Wrightsboro Elementary and say, all right, here's who I want on the safety team, because that's way below, the level, and or even or the safety director. It should be the school gets to make that choice. But I think that everybody should have one. And I didn't read that clearly, that every school was required to have one. And then they had to report their findings to the health and safety leadership team that we just talked about. And I don't feel comfortable that that is happening, that there is that line of communication anywhere. So again, that's just following our policy, but some of the wording there is what I was interested in, on saying that we will have a team at every school.
So Ms. Crable, I think maybe you could say that each school or school system site that houses employees shall have a or a site-based safety team that will report to the health and safety leadership team on schedule to be established by the superintendent.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that, because then it would be every building. So like central office, admin building would have one, the Carolina Beach Road complex would have one, and all of our school facilities would have one.
So we're in a transition period, obviously, when it comes to the director of safety. I'm wondering if it wouldn't be wise to wait on this until the new employee can add some input into this policy. I mean, I don't know how you would feel about that.
I would
I
certainly
don't really know a timeline, so.
wait for that.
So when we reviewed these, our previous safety director, Dave Spencer, was a part of reviewing this. And I'm comfortable moving this forward and training our new safety director on this. But of course, if you want to wait for some input, that's completely up to you. I think I would be comfortable with the director of safety implementing the policy as you see fit.
Well, and yeah, and he is going to need training. So I think the more guidance that we have already in policy to give him will be helpful. I mean, just knowing what I know about being a safety professional, sometimes you just need to be told, this is what we have to do. And then
That's fine.
Yeah.
If you're comfortable, I'm comfortable. I just put the idea out there, but that's absolutely fine.
And then, so that's good with that. I just want consistency at all schools and all facilities, that we all are doing it. We all have the same infrastructure in place, and how we use that infrastructure, it can be managed at the site.
Can I ask a question? I apologize. I stepped
Yeah.
away for a little while, but I do know that all of the schools do have their safety committees.
Right.
And we have a district-wide meeting annually with individuals or representatives from those groups.
Yep.
But what I was hearing is that was reported to a safety leadership committee, and okay, because that information is just going back to the safety director. I don't think it goes beyond that. And the crisis management committee that Ms. Craybill and I are part of is kind of I think that's a different purpose.
It is, yes.
Okay.
So there's two, and that's what I was trying to get across, is that there are two separate entities focusing on safety from two different angles.
Exactly. Okay. I'm up to speed now. Thank you.
Okay.
The committee we were talking about would be a newly created committee of Heather Listabarger as benefits supervisor, Julie Moore as risk manager and director of safety, for reviewing the collection of accident, injury, and injury loss prevention reports.
Okay.
And yeah, and I would propose that when we're putting that together, that we look at including at least a couple of our stakeholders that are required to gather that safety information, just from the perspective of a principal, who has to gather this information and report it on, just to have, so it's not just a complete top down, with no input, but that's your call.
Okay.
Just to mention, most of that's already submitted, or it's all submitted, and we have the data. It's just a matter of sharing it and discussing it, because with
Right.
every incident, they already reported.
Yeah. And
But yeah.
I know that we are, because you have to. It's just a matter of, doing something with the data, not just gathering it into a spreadsheet, and like, got to do something with it. All right. So in letter C, in the second paragraph, it's the second sentence, where it says, if the hazard cannot be removed altogether, procedures that limit exposure to the hazard should be implemented when practical. And I wanted to put in there procedures, and or equipment, that could eliminate the hazard, because procedures are administrative controls. That's how you manage a hazard, by behavior. But I would like to put in there that we put in an equipment that we might need to, because you have where practical or when practical, but those are the two safety things, in the safety world, is you're looking at procedures and you're looking at equipment, engineering controls, things that you can actually try and eliminate or reduce the hazard without having to change behaviors, because the equipment does it for you.
What about just putting in measures shall be put in place that limit exposure?
Yeah, I can go with that. I'm just,
I like that.
yeah, measures are good. I just like to talk about behavior versus hardwiring. I mean, because sometimes it's just easier to fix it than it is to manage the behavior that goes in there. But I can go with measures. And then in letter D, where we're talking, there's only one paragraph in there when we're talking about the development of safety standards for facilities, equipment, machinery, tools, work. Can we write something in there? If I know you're doing it, Eddie, but that says safety standards that include preventive maintenance programs.
You reading that, Dalton?
Yeah. So it would say that the superintendent or designee in the development of safety standards for facilities, and including, which might include, or including but not limited to, preventive maintenance programs or preventive maintenance practices.
Well, I think in the facilities world, preventive maintenance, sounds to me like you're
Inspection,
talking more
audits.
about training as opposed to preventive maintenance.
Okay. Because there's a difference in developing safety standards and then actually putting them into practice and having people know what you're, because you develop them and you train on them. So if we would include something on training, then I would feel better.
Yeah, I think we're doing that, and
I know you are.
adding training is fine.
So development of safety standards and applicable training.
Yep.
Okay.
So the next section about education and training doesn't cover.
Yeah, well, there's so many different levels, I guess. Well, I guess it could go there. Well, that's actually in the very, okay.
I feel like it addresses training in that section. But I mean, I don't know if you want anything in addition to that.
No, I guess we could go with that. I mean, because in the paragraph before, I was really looking at the standards and to making sure that we called attention to preventive maintenance doesn't necessarily mean maintenance. It means, looking at things ahead of time, so like in auditing and inspecting before we get to the point. So we can take training out in E and just go with the F.
Okay.
But there's lots of different levels of training, and those are also some of the kinds of things that our health and safety leadership teams should be monitoring. Are we doing all the trainings that we need to be doing, annually or within our own departments? And maintenance has a big chunk, of facilities and operations has a big chunk. within the child nutrition and, the bus drivers and maintenance of equipment. Their training looks a lot different than, our school staff, teacher, faculty staff. But the school leadership team should also have to be looking at that. And I didn't see, that's not listed in the 1, 2, and 3. It just says promotion of safe practices and safety awareness. It doesn't talk about training in there at all. But that should be part of their role as well. Not doing the training, just making sure that it has happened.
Was there anything else on injury and loss prevention on 4201?
Can we add number 4 in that second paragraph?
Sorry, where exactly are you adding? Want to add number 4?
In the second paragraph, where it says these efforts will include accident and injury prevention and investigation, hazard investigation and control, promotion of safe practices and safety awareness. Because promotion of safe practices does not necessarily imply, and safety awareness does not imply training.
And and so then, and number 4.
And number 4 would be ensuring that appropriate all applicable training has occurred, safety training.
Yeah, I mean, we could put it there, but I do think the program of education and training must be documented and must include instruction on workplace-related safety practices. I mean, I think that probably covers it, but you could put it there.
It does cover that we're going to do it. The first paragraph covers that somebody is going to make sure that it happens. And at the district level. And it's probably the safety director that is going to be responsible for all of those things as a member of that team. He's going to bring a lot of the information to that team.
And that is a part of that job description for the safety.
All right. So McKenna, are you good? Did you have that?
Yes, got it.
All right. Okay. So injury and loss prevention, 4201 moves on for first reading. 4202, service animals in schools. This is a fun one.
So if I might, Mr. Beaulieu, we recently, very recently, revised the district's existing service animal policy and procedures, and spent a lot of time on that with the Office for Civil Rights, revising it and making sure that they were in agreement and approved the existing policy. And we did training, or I won't say we, Julie did training on that policy system-wide. And so I would be a little reluctant now, with less than a year later, to change that policy from what has been given a stamp of approval from OCR in response to some very specific concerns about it. The only thing I might recommend would be to add the last 2 paragraphs in the School Board Association policy about an appeal, and add that, because I think that might be appropriate. So if a service animal is excluded, an individual with a disability will be provided to the opportunity to participate without the animal, and then paragraph F, the appeal of an exclusion. But the rest of the language, and I'll let Julie weigh in as well. I think that there's been a lot of training and focus on that policy in the current form, and would be reluctant to change it now.
I completely agree. My suggestions were also to include that last section in E, and to include F at the end in ours. And I was going to suggest that we keep ours. So exactly what Deborah has shared.
I think that's excellent. I do want to make sure, and I'm 99% sure, that we do have something in there in our policy for emotional support animals. Because I'm pretty sure Palmer is still at Pine Valley. I think, right?
So I believe the emotional support animal is in the regulations that go along with that. There, and I have reviewed an MOU for an emotional school support animal that I worked with Dr. Burns on. I'm not sure. I can't remember where that is right now. I think it went through. But I can talk to Julie about that. But I know that there has been an MOU and request for that in at least one, maybe more schools.
And it's for a facility support animal, so it's not specific to any one person's ability. Different.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that was still in there because we have emotional support animals in our buildings, so I just wanted to make sure that we still had that language in a policy. But I agree. Other than that, I think we should just keep as is.
Yeah, sorry, not to split hairs. The emotional support animal and a facility support animal are different because we don't have, there's not an obligation necessarily for emotional support animals. So it's a service animal or a facility support animal. Deborah, I don't know if I need to explain that differently.
You're exactly right, Julie. So the current policy says that pets, comfort animals, and emotional support animals are not service animals and people are not entitled to bring them onto school property. Non-service animals may be allowed at the discretion of the building administrator with the prior approval of the superintendent or designee. And so that's that MOU process that we have in place.
So would we just, I'm fine with keeping the policy that we have. What is the title of it? Because this policy is specifically service animals. And
so the current policy 8432 is use of service animals. And so it gives the distinction between a service animal and a comfort animal. It tells when, who may be, or what animals are qualified as service animals, the use of service animals, and then it refers to the much more detailed policy, the much more detailed procedures and regulations that everyone has been trained on.
So do we need to change the name of the policy to be use of service / emotional animal? Because
no. The emotional support animal it's not something that is, it's not an entitlement. Service animal you have to allow if it meets the qualifications. An emotional support animal or a comfort animal is not an entitlement, and it is only allowed under certain, discretionary applications like the school-wide therapy animal or comfort animal. So I don't think we need to change the title. I would just say we can renumber the existing policy 8432 to match the numbering, and then add those last two paragraphs from the School Board Association policy. That'd be my recommendation.
I'm good with that.
With the service animals
reflect what it actually says.
Do we need to bring do we still need to bring the revised policy forward for first reading, or do we just have the board pass the revision, Ms. Dagner?
McKenna, I think that revisions to existing policies can just be done on one reading. I don't think that renumbering it necessarily makes it a new policy, but
okay.
What do you think? What do you think, McKenna?
Yeah, I think you can just approve it at the next meeting, just with as a revision to a current policy, because you're not changing, you're adding 2 paragraphs and changing the number. That's it.
Yeah. So I think that would be fine. You may just want to explain, Nelson, to the board what we're doing with that one.
That's fine. And then okay, so I don't need to do anything. We don't need to vote on moving it forward for first reading or anything. We're just adding a revision. Or we're revising.
I mean, so the policy committee is deciding on the revision to recommend to the board.
Okay, okay. Thank you. All right, I think this will likely be our last policy, release of students from school, 4210. And then we will,
Don't we have 15 more minutes?
we do. I
I
don't
think,
think our pace can guarantee that we can get through more than one. And I'm ever aware of and respectful of people's time. So I would like to, before we close, discuss changing the format of these a little bit. I think more can be accomplished. I spoke with Dr. Faust in an hour and a half and having 2 meetings rather than one. I think these 3 hours asking a lot of people in the middle of the day. So I don't know if there was an appetite. Ms. Crable, are you okay with that?
yeah, I hate sitting for 3 hours and wouldn't mind breaking it up, but I would certainly do what is most convenient for the senior staff that has to sit here for 3 hours with us.
Yeah, so I will, I'll reach out to everybody individually to see schedule wise how that looks. But we can discuss that moving forward. So.
And another and this is just a suggestion, and I don't want to create any more work for anyone, but since Dr. Faust and Julie and other, administrators are reviewing these policies ahead of time and coming prepared with their comments and proposed changes, if they wanted to go ahead and circulate those in advance so that board members had an opportunity to review them before the committee meeting, that might cut down on a little bit of time as well. And so you could have a marked up version that's, marked administration input or administration recommendations ahead of time. And then maybe that would move things along a little more quickly.
That's an excellent suggestion, Ms. Stagger. I think we should look at implementing something like that.
And I would hold myself to that as well, to circulate in advance any recommendations I would have.
Well, and I don't have a problem doing that either, because maybe a lot of the conversations you guys could address them if I just tell you up front what they are. I mean, because I mark up all mine and just write on them. I mean, if that's what we want to do, then I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I think that would be really good. I think we really need to get through the 4000 series. These they're all important, but we really need to try to power through some of these. So policy 4210, Ms. Varnum, I know you bring these to us a lot.
Yes, let me double check. I don't have any recommendations on this one.
The only recommendation I have is that it's the last sentence where it says principals are encouraged to develop guidelines as necessary to implement this policy. I'm just feeling like principals must develop guidelines and include them in their school safety plan or in school, and include them somewhere, because principals who do not have plans are the schools where there's going to be issues. So I don't see anything wrong with directing the schools that you will do this. You will make up whatever your plan is. And even if you want to copy it, or if Julie wants to say, here's what we're going to do, like a lot of schools, elementary schools, say you will not check out your kid after 2 p.m. We won't check you out early or over the phone. And almost every school I go to has that. And you see it on a sign when you're walking up. So maybe
that's fine. And principals is that good?
Yeah. I mean, Julie,
principals will develop guidelines as necessary.
Yeah.
I've got a quick question on this policy, if I may.
Sure.
Up in the first paragraph, It talks about student vehicles remaining parked and not being able to be moved. And I just don't know if we can leave that up to the principal instead of just having it that they can't be moved. And my thinking here is, you know, the student parking is typically far away from where they may be arriving back from a late night event. So that means that the kids are walking across you know, a dark campus after a sporting event or something like that. Typically, the kids might be able to move their car to wherever they're going to be returning to on campus that day. So just a thought there.
Okay, what would the language change look like? I mean, that makes sense.
Just something with principal's permission, I would add. And then the other thing, I don't know that needs to be added in here on a totally separate note. Do we need to have anything on search of vehicles?
So I would say the search is going to be covered in a different, you know, policy. This is really about releasing students from school. And I honestly, I'm not even sure that the student vehicle part needs to be in the policy at all if it's part of the guidelines that the principal recommends or develops.
I agree with that. I was going to say the exact same thing. That's just a practice that the principal would use.
So I think you could delete the first or the last two sentences in that first paragraph and just students are not permitted to leave campus during the school day without permission, period. You get down to the last and say principals must develop guidelines to implement this policy and leave the micromanaging of where student vehicles are parked to the school and not put it in policy.
Perfect.
Does this apply to like high school students who are allowed to check themselves out and go to a doctor's appointment and then bring themselves back to school? Because the policy is the release of students from school. So normally a parent, like in the younger kids, the parent comes to school, picks up the kid, takes them to the appointment, brings them back. So what we're saying is students can't do that.
Well, without permission.
Why are we saying students can't do that?
Okay.
I don't read the policy that way.
Yeah, they can't do it with permission.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that would be covered under students are not permitted to leave campus during the day without permission. So if they get permission, they could do that.
Okay.
Thanks all.
So McKenna, is that, are we good there? Just getting rid of those last two sentences and adding principals will develop guidelines? All right. Well, it is 11:52. I know we could go for one more. I would ask though that everybody on the call, if you could just email Ms. Joy if that availability, just say, I would say Tuesday from 10:30 to 12, and making it twice a month, the second and fourth Tuesdays. And if that works for your time, please just let Ms. Joy know, and that way we can start scheduling those and doing 2 hour-and-a-half meetings rather than a 3-hour meeting.
To start on the 23rd?
You know, actually, that would be good. I think if we can try to get these done by the board meeting, I think that would be very helpful.
I already have a commitment on the 23rd, so
We can just start next month.
Yeah, sorry, I'll make that. I think I can normally make that change, but I have a court hearing that day.
That's fine. Yeah, we can just start the next month. So, thank you everybody for your work this week. I know it's pretty busy. All right, so at this time, I will entertain a motion to, this won't be the only one I make because I have to do the other one. I'll entertain a motion to move policy 3620, 4125, 4130, 4150, 4152, 4201, and 4202 forward for first reading. and 4210, I'm sorry, for first reading in the April board meeting.
I'm sorry, Mr. Pulley, you did not say 4135, did you?
I did not say
Okay,
4135.
good. Okay, thank you.
Is there a motion?
I motion that we do that.
And I will second. Ms. Craybill, how do you vote?
Aye.
And I vote aye. The motion is agreed to. I will also entertain a motion to revise our service animal policy, renumber it to 4202, and add language.
Is 4202 the number that we want to use? Okay,
Policy.
I make that motion, Nelson. You're
All
free.
right, and I will second it. Sorry, is it back? Okay. Yeah, I'll second it. Ms. Craybill, how do you vote?
Aye. You're frozen, Nelson. Can I adjourn the meeting? Oh, Nelson has to vote. Do you want me to get him on the phone?
Yeah, I think you can get him on the phone, although he made you both made the motion and second, so I think his vote is assumed.
Yeah. Oh, Lordy.
He's connecting. He's back on.
Okay,
All right, is it back?
yeah.
All right. Well, let's try that again. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Did you vote on that last one?
Yes,
We
I
didn't hear
did.
you. Okay, so just,
Oh, sorry.
okay.
Uh,
I
I
make a
voted
motion
aye.
to adjourn.
Okay, I second. Ms. Craybill, how do you vote?
Aye.
I vote aye before I freeze again. Y'all have a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.